Joker is directed by Todd Phillips and stars Joaquin Phoenix, Zazie Beetz, and Robert De Niro, and is a version of the Joker's origin story that we've really never seen before, well, at least in this much detail anyway. Outside of Avengers Endgame, this was probably my most anticipated movie of the year, for a number of different reasons. That being said, there was always one element of this movie that had me sceptical from the moment I heard it was announced, and that's the fact that Todd Phillips is directing it. Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Todd Phillips as a person, but he's the director of the Hangover trilogy, and going from something like that to a gritty, dark comic book movie such as Joker, I just thought seemed a bit like a weird career choice. Like, I'm not saying that comedy directors can go on to do dramas. For example, look at Adam McKay. He was famous for movies like Step Brothers, and then he went and made The Big Short and Vice, both got nominated for a load of Oscars. And even one of the Farley brothers, famous for making Dumber and Dumber, and then he made Green Book, and that won Best Picture this year. So, it's not impossible, it just seemed a bit odd. That being said, though, now that I've actually seen the movie, I am just blown away. After coming out of this movie, I was genuinely speechless, and I still kind of am at the moment, because it's just a lot to process. And I'm just so amazed by how well this film turned out, considering who's behind it, and also considering that it tackles quite a lot of things, but manages to make everything fit in the movie's narrative without it ever feeling cluttered or certain things feeling forced. And I'm just blown away by how well this film turned out. Believe it or not, actually, Todd Phillips' direction is actually one of the better aspects of this movie. He manages to really encapsulate the gritty and kind of horrific tone of the movie, because right from the word go, this movie and just the setting of the film as well feels very unclean, dirty, grimy, gritty, and just really horrible. And that pretty much carries throughout the entire movie. There is not a single moment where you feel better or happier, or where the tone kind of shifts and feels a lot more lighter. It never gives you that. The entire film feels very dark, disturbing, unsettling, and gritty, and just really never lets up on that, and just really intensifies the more the movie goes on. And I just loved every minute of it. I thought music was well used in the movie as well, whether it's pre-existing songs from that time period or whether it's the score itself. I thought they both worked really well. I thought the score was fucking unsettling as hell, and I thought it really, really worked. And a lot of the messages and themes this movie has to offer on society and how society treats mental illness, I thought were really, really well realised in this movie. But I'm going to get to the thing that you're probably all waiting for me to talk about, and that is Joaquin Phoenix. My God, he is brilliant in this film. I've always really appreciated him as an actor because he's willing to go one step further than a lot of other actors are. And this movie just proves that in leaps and bounds. Because he does things in this movie that are genuinely horrifying and are actually kind of hard to watch at times. But he just takes it in his stride and doesn't flinch at a single thing. His performance in this movie is truly mesmerising, and I'm going to say the exact same thing everyone else has already said, but if he does not get nominated for an Oscar, let alone win it, then there's something wrong with the Oscars. He gives probably the best performance of the year. And I know you've probably heard that a million times, but it is true. What he does in this movie is genuinely brilliant. The way he starts off as Arthur, and you can tell right from the word go that there's something not quite right with him, that he's a little broken inside. And then that just progresses to Joker by the end of the film. It all just works so perfectly. And there are certain bits of Arthur's personality that show very subtly at the start that just come full formation by the end when he becomes Joker. And there's just really subtle nuances in his performance that go from subtle to full on towards the end that just I just really liked his performance. I also loved how the tone and feel of the movie reflected Arthur's mental state at certain points in the film. Throughout the movie, well, at least as it goes on anyway, you can feel something building up inside, almost like a guitar string being tightened, only for it to eventually snap at the end. And you can very clearly see that in Arthur's mental state and his character throughout the whole film. But somehow they managed to incorporate that in the tone and overall feel of the movie as well, almost as if it's like some subtle layer of tension that slowly builds and builds and builds without you realizing it. And then once Arthur snaps, that same bit of tension snaps as well. And when I realized that was happening, I was just like, that's bloody brilliant, because you are feeling the same kind of frustrations that Arthur feels. So when he eventually does snap and all this horrific shit happens towards the end, it feels worth it. I mean, it's kind of hard to watch at times, but it does feel worth the wait because you've been following him from the start and you've been building up all of the emotions he's been building up as the film has progressed. And I'm just going to say this now, without getting into spoilers, the final 15 to 20 minutes, my jaw was on the floor. It's fucking brilliant. The finale of this movie is one of my favourites in a long time, probably since the ending of Whiplash, which, as if you've seen Whiplash, you'll know the ending of that film is fucking masterful. But the ending of this movie, at least the last 15 to 20 minutes anyway, they're just brilliant. They're just absolutely brilliant and are easily some of my favourite moments out of any movie this year. Now, I just very quickly want to address two things that a lot of people have been saying about this movie. First of all, that it feels a bit too similar to the movie Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese. Yeah, it kind of does, but I personally think Joker does enough of its own thing to stand out against Taxi Driver. Yes, it does have a lot of similarities aesthetically and structurally, but like I said, it does enough of its own unique thing to make it stand out from that film. And besides, if it's influenced by Taxi Driver, is that really a bad thing? Because, I mean, every movie is influenced by another movie. No movie is really completely 100% original. Everything's influenced by a thing. So the fact that it's influenced by a movie as great as Taxi Driver is, you know, a good thing. The second thing I want to address is apparently that there is controversy over the amount of violence in this movie. First of all, I've seen way more violent films. This movie is fairly tame in comparison. But that being said, I can also understand why people would say that, because yes, there is some really intense violence in this movie, but because it's so sparse and only happens at certain points and feels more realistic than a lot of other films, I can kind of understand the controversy. Like I said, there are way more violent movies out there. Like, this is nowhere near as bad as something like, I don't know, Mandy, or that's the first one that came to my mind anyway. But yeah, there are much more violent movies out there. But I do think maybe because the violence is so sparse, and when it does happen, it's just like, boom, in your face, and feels a lot more jarring and realistic because of it, that may be where the controversy comes from. But I personally think people should just chill out maybe for a second. Some films are violent, deal with it. If I had to nitpick, I would say there are some really, really minor moments, just a couple of them, that didn't quite work for me. Like I said, they are really, really minor, really small moments in the film that are kind of inconsequential when you really think about it, but they just kind of didn't work for me. But yeah, that's really the only nitpick I have with this film. Which is why I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. With subsequent rewatches, it will probably end up being a 10, but I think it's too soon to say at this point, but I'm happy giving it a 9.5 at this moment. So guys, that was my review of Joker. I'd love to know what you thought of it in the comments below. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.